All right, good evening. My name is Tracy Craig. I'll be moderating this meeting tonight. We're glad that we have an attendee to watch this. This is Alameda County Department of Environmental Health's community meeting for the 10605 Foothill Boulevard project in East Oakland. Ruby Hill Properties and Lifelong Medical Care are going to develop this site into a medical office for outpatient primary care, dental care, wellness, and patient education services. They have a voluntary cleanup agreement with the Department of Environmental Health to oversee environmental activities. It's important to note that Ruby Hill did not use chemicals, but they're addressing them to ready the site for redevelopment. This is a webinar, and we are recording this, and this recording will be available at a later date on GeoTracker, the Water Board's website, for people that might want to look at it. Next slide, John. And this is our agenda. It's rather simple. We'll start off with introductions. I have Jonathan Sanders, who's the caseworker for Alameda County. Jonathan, you want to raise your hand? Dylan Rowe is also in attendance. She's the Chief of Land and Water. Her camera is off, but she'll be here to answer questions. We have Surjit Singh, who's the property owner developer for Ruby Hill. Surjit, he just went dark. Raise your hand so everybody knows who you are. Good, okay. And we also have Elizabeth Kimbrell, who's the environmental consultant Langan. And where is Elizabeth? There she is, thank you. The site, again, next slide, John. The site is located in East Oakland. That's a 500-foot radius around the site. That's who we mailed to. It's adjacent to the 580 freeway. For easy access to the medical center once it's developed. Next slide. Okay. And again, the property is owned by Ruby Hill. The property is owned by Ruby Hill Properties and Lifelong Medical Care. They are the developers. That's the site up in the upper right. It's vacant right now. They're going to develop a 3-story medical office with parking. As I said before, they did not contaminate the site, but they will be addressing it as part of their due diligence to redevelop the property. Alameda County Department of Environmental Health is the county agency overseeing that. Next slide. Okay, and this is just a schematic that shows the different roles for people. So the developer, I don't have to say that their time is in the middle. The environmental consultant is Langan. Their general contractor has not been selected yet. In the middle, overseeing environmental issues with the Alameda County Department of Public Health. The City of Oakland actually oversees entitlement of the project and project redevelopment. So this meeting tonight, just to be clear, is to address environmental issues only. It's not about the development of the property. It's not about what's going to be built there. It's only about environmental issues. And then the Bay Area Air Quality Management District oversees air quality, particularly dust related to excavation activities. Next slide, John. And then environmental conditions, I'm going to hand this over to Jonathan Sanders, the caseworker.
Thank you, Tracy, and thank you for all that introduction. So my name is Jonathan Sanders. I am the primary caseworker associated with this case, and I work with the Alameda County Department of Environmental Health. So the site is as Tracy said, a property on the corner of Foothill and near I-5. So the property was developed between the 1960s and 1982, and it was operated as a retail automotive service and fueling station. Historically, there have been contaminants that have been released to the site associated with those operations. Some of those contaminants were addressed during the oversight of a leaking underground petroleum site. It was closed in 2012. But those releases were associated with historic operations. When the historic fueling station was closed in 1982, it was demolished, and the site has been vacant, uncovered lot since about 1984. There have been additional investigations when Ruby Hill got involved to redevelop the site to evaluate the current conditions and to see what current environmental conditions are and how they might impact both receptors at the site as well as nearby properties. John, go ahead and go to the next slide. What you're seeing here is a close-up picture of the property, and it also highlights some of the areas where contaminants likely came from. We call these source areas. Really, there are 3 areas that we have concerns of from the standpoint of where release occurred. The first is a former UST pit. USTs are underground storage tanks. So when the site was a gas station, those were the large underground tanks that held the gasoline and diesel. That's the area shown in the dotted gray. There was also the dispensing island, which is where you actually pump the fuel to put it into your vehicle. That is the area highlighted by the blue square. And then there was the historic building on the site, which had some known historic uses with automotive service. And that's the white rectangle with the gray dashed lines. John, go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So the way that these potential releases are being, or the way that the residual contamination at the site is being addressed is through corrective actions. And we'll go into those specific corrective actions in a little bit, but there has been a draft corrective action plan that outlines what is going to be done that has been uploaded to the case file, which is publicly available on the internet. The period that we are accepting comment on this corrective action plan extends from January 22nd until February 20th. In addition to saying what's going to be done to address residual contamination, this report also summarizes some of the current conditions and the findings and investigations that were done during the planning phases for this redevelopment and the evaluation done under the oversight of Alameda County to evaluate potential risks to on-site and off-site receptors. Really, the corrective actions are focused on 2 main pathways or 2 main media, and that is soil that has contamination and soil gas or soil vapor, which has contamination. Soil gas or soil vapor is the airspace inside of the soil that can have things in it. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So as I've mentioned, the corrective action plan summarizes the strategies that will be employed, but in general, they fall into 3 different strategies. The first is bulk excavation. So as part of or concurrent with redevelopment, there will be excavation to remove areas of known soil contamination. And this is predominantly around the vicinity of the historic fuel dispenser and the on-site or the historic on-site structure. They will be digging down to a depth of about 20 feet to remove known contaminated soil, and that will be disposed of off-site at a regulated disposal facility. In addition, they will be adding some chemicals into the ground to help break down anything that may remain. This is called an oxygen releasing compound. The purpose of that is to enhance the degradation, the natural degradation of any products that remain in the ground. Once these excavations are done and the chemical we talked about, the oxygen reducing compound or oxygen releasing compound, are placed in the base of that excavation, they will backfill those holes with clean imported material so that we know that we removed stuff and we didn't bring something new on. The rest of the site outside of that area will also have excavation that will remove any residual metals that were found from the sampling or any shallow impacts that were found that are associated with the historic site use. It'll also involve, there will also be some excavation along utility corridors where new utilities are going to be coming and being installed to service the proposed development. These utility corridors will be backfilled with certified clean materials and will have trench plugs to prevent lateral migration across those conduits. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So in addition to removing known areas of contamination, they are also going to be installing a engineering control system at this building. An engineering control system is something that's designed to collect and route soil vapors in a manner that they will not have an adverse impact on the occupants of the on-site structure, nor will it allow for lateral migration of those contaminants to adjacent properties. This engineering control really is comprised of two parts. There is a plastic barrier that goes underneath the base of the structure, the on-site development, that prevents any sort of vapors from coming up through the bottom of the building into the indoor air. It also has a ventilation layer beneath that, so that when vapors do get to that point, if they get to that point, they have a path of low resistance to go up and past the building. So they don't pass through the building, they essentially go around it. That also helps control lateral migration, so that if there are vapors that come up, they don't go laterally when they hit that barrier to other people's properties. And so it's really designed to protect on-site occupants as well as prevent that lateral migration. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So during the installation of these engineering controls and during the remedial excavations and removal of these contaminants, there are some things that are going to be done to make sure that there isn't unacceptable exposure to people and the people in the community. Really, when we talk about exposure during these events, we're worried about three methods for exposure. There's the inhalation of dust or airborne contaminants, such as those vapors. There is contact with your skin, and then there is ingestion, which could be dirt on the site if your hands touched it and then you ate some food, or it could be ingestion of the dust. Really, as far as an exposure standpoint, we're worried about a couple things. The first is the construction workers that are actually on the site that are working with the soil. And then the second are people in the nearby community that may be impacted by construction activities. So to make sure that we don't have these unacceptable exposures and to make sure that we control those so that people don't have a route for exposure, Alameda County does require several methods to be implemented. Go ahead and go to the next slide. The methods that we're going to require implementation have a couple different factors. The first is going to be perimeter monitoring. So there will be monitors around this entire site that are going to have real-time results that are going to tell you how much dust is going across that property line. And will also tell you if there are any volatils that are coming off of that property. In addition to these perimeter monitoring, there will also be samples that are collected from various soil as construction is happening, as well as pre-construction samples. And there will be management of the on-site soil to make sure that there aren't situations where a heavy wind comes by and kicks up a bunch of dust. Make sure that you don't have large amounts of soil sitting in stockpiles when they be avoided. In general, soil will be direct loaded, meaning when the excavator pulls the soil out of the earth, it's going to put it right into a truck rather than putting it somewhere else on site. There may be some limited stockpiling in between truck runs, but the intent will be to ensure that we don't have a massing of soil. There will also be clearly marked signs on the perimeter of the property so that if there are issues or if people are noticing problems coming from the site, there will be numbers to call to get a very expeditious response, not only from us, but also from the people doing the work. The county does take these sites very seriously, and we take our role very seriously. It is important to note that once the remedial aspects, meaning the removal of contaminated soil, is done, general dust complaints from construction, say once the building is going vertical, those fall under the oversight of the Bay Area Air Quality Management District, which is one of the agencies that was shown, Tracy, when you handed the slide off. Their number will also be posted, but it is important for just the sake of clarity to note that Alameda County Department of Environmental Health's oversight has to do with the excavation of the soil and the control of dust associated with that. In addition to that, we will also have requirements for stormwater management. That will be to ensure that during a major rain event, you don't have rain that hits potentially contaminated soil and then draws that off the site. Go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So in addition to the on-site excavation requirements and the site management requirements therein, there are also requirements for the transit path and the routes that trucks can take when entering and leaving the site. And there's a couple reasons for this. The main reason is to ensure that the trucking paths don't create an opportunity for dust to be generated where it doesn't need to be. In addition to those trucking paths, there's also going to be requirements for trucks to limit how long they are sitting idling. There will be wash stations when you leave or when you come on or leave the site to ensure that they're not tracking mud or dust onto the road. The trucks will need to be covered when they leave the site so that there isn't an open bay where wind just hits that dirt and blows it out. And there will be special training that all the drivers receive to ensure that they are aware of the requirements and adhere to those requirements. There will also be some special, there will be provisions for the construction workers parking. So they will have designated areas to park during the construction of the site so that they're not overwhelming the site or the area around the site, and to ensure that there aren't traffic flow issues. Next slide, please. So those are the general methods we're using, but in addition to these methods that are being used, it's really important to the county that we have clear and open communication with all stakeholders, particularly members of the community where this is happening. And to that end, we have signage that will be placed around the site to ensure that there are contact names, contact numbers, and that you can get a hold of a real person if there is an issue that you see. In addition, all of the reports and all of the results of monitoring will be available for public review and consumption. They'll be uploaded to the State Water Board's GeoTracker website, which is it's a data repository and a database. That is active right now. If you go on there right now, you will see correspondence from the county, directive letters. You'll also be able to see the draft corrective action plan, which we mentioned earlier, that gives the details on how these excavations, emplacement of this chemical and the barrier system are going to be implemented. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So this last slide here is showing a rough schedule of what we think is going to be happening and what the plan is. So January 22nd to February 20th, that is when our public comment period is for the draft corrective action plan. If you're on this call, you likely received a mailer because you're within a 500-foot radius. You maybe didn't. If you didn't, that's also on the state GeoTracker website. But everyone that's within 500 feet should have received a mailer for that. As I mentioned before, we are accepting comments, and we will address comments that are received in writing before February 20th. February 3rd is today. That's our public meeting. We are expecting that we will get comments, we will address them, and that corrective action implementation plan will be submitted in March. That not only addresses all the comments, but can provide additional details necessary to ensure that everything is done smoothly and that has a chance of, or is expected to be successful in removing and controlling any contamination of the site. Remedial excavation is anticipated to begin in the spring of 2021. And following that remedial excavation, they'll start the installation of the vapor mitigation system. That's that plastic liner and the ventilation system, after which they will go vertical. They'll pour their concrete, they'll put up their foundation, or they'll put the foundation elements, they'll put walls up, and all those construction elements. Throughout this entire process, Alameda County will continue with our communication efforts. You will see fact sheets that come out that update you on the status of these conditions. So don't be surprised if you see more mailers from us. And as needed, we will also have more public meetings. So if there are concerns, or if there's anything happening that the community sees that they have concerns about, we will be sure to address those. and we will schedule future stakeholder meetings as appropriate. Next slide, please. So with that, and in order to further emphasize the importance of communication, this slide shows the contact information for myself. So Jonathan Sanders, I'm the case manager. That's my phone number and my email address. Tracy Craig, who is the person that did the introduction, she's the communications relations manager, and Surjit Singh, who is the property owner and the developer. So with that, I have no other comments. I think I'll open it up to questions. It looks like we still only have the one participant, which is Nicole. Nicole, you're welcome to unmute yourself and ask any questions.
Yes, I don't know how far along you are in the process in terms of the plans for the building, but I did want to ask, I know that it's going to be a parking lot along with the clinic. Do you know where the cars that are like entering and exiting the parking lot, what street they're going to be entering and exiting from?
So this is a point of clarification. Our role is not to do the entitlement or to approve or disapprove of structural elements or that sort of thing. That being said, it is something we look at when we are looking at the designs. And so Surjit and or Langan, unless this is changed, I believe that the entry point is along Foothill Boulevard, kind of. Do you mind going to slide? Oh, I think it's.
Can you go to the overview slide, please, John, where we have the 500-foot radius? And then Surjit probably can address this as well.
So that slide's actually fine right there. If you go to slide 7, you see right where the word proposed.
Jonathan, why don't you let Surjit answer this?
Okay.
Sorry, say that again. What was the question again? Sorry.
The question was how are cars, once developed, where's the parking and how will cars enter and exit the property? Will
The
it be
parking will be actually in the basement. It'll be in the building itself. There is no like outside. I mean, we are creating a parking underneath the building. And Liz, do you have the site plan in terms of where the entry, etc., is going to be? It's not in front of me, so if you can answer that, I'll appreciate it.
Yeah, I can jump in. It'll be along Foothill, like Jonathan mentioned. The entrance to the parking lot, it's kind of over where it says proposed remediation area on the call out on the screen on the slide we're looking at right now. That's about where the entrance is to the parking structure. That answers your question, Nicole.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Do you have any other questions?
Well, I do feel like this clinic would be beneficial to the community, but I just feel like the fact that I looked at the site on GeoTracker, and over the years, I know they did the whole thing of removing the gasoline storage tanks, but the last time they checked the soil, like there was still a high concentration of TPH, which from my understanding is a harmful chemical. And I know you're gonna, do the air monitoring and make sure that it doesn't get out into the community, but it's air. It's like you can't really control air. So I just don't feel like this would be the best place for it, because all these toxins could be released into the neighborhood. And there's an apartment right across the street where kids live and a daycare like not too far from this site. And so the kids can be getting, exposed to these chemicals and potentially getting sick. And I'm not sure why Lifelong Clinic is trying to put a clinic here, considering like they have one at Eastmont and one on 99th Avenue. So it's kind of like, I don't get why why they can't just expand on those instead of putting this one here on the corner.
So
that's a couple questions. I think first let's address how you're going to be able to excavate safely with what we call sensitive receptors, so young children across the street. And then maybe after that, we can address why the clinic is cited here when there's two other clinics. There's a clinic at Eastmont and 99th. So Jonathan, you want to take the first question, and then Surjit, we can get to the other. Does that sound good?
I think it's actually appropriate for Langen to answer the question. And the reason I say that is because they're the ones that ultimately are going to be doing the monitoring, and our job as the county is going to be to provide oversight on that.
I'm gonna jump in here. It is appropriate for the county to talk about this. Langen is gonna do the work, but we're the agency that provides oversight, and we are concerned whenever any kind of excavation is done of contaminated soil, because there is the potential for the very things that you asked about. And that is true. What is true, and I'll be quite frank, there's contaminated soil around a large majority of Oakland. And so as sites are redeveloped, it's a good time to get it out of the soil, because you don't want contamination in the air at all. You don't want it contributing to the already poor air quality in a lot of parts of Oakland, but you also don't want it in the ground because it can move through the ground and it can impact people in different ways. So what we're going to do, and what we're going to make sure that happens, is that there are appropriate controls that are in place. Jonathan talked about them some, but that there are appropriate controls in place to make sure that children in daycare facilities, schools, the residents in the neighborhood are not impacted by soil that could get up into dust. And but I will be quite honest that sometimes when you are excavating at old gas stations, there is some odor and so that will be monitored, but it's short-term odor, and if there is odor, we will make sure that the excavations stop and the appropriate things are done to suppress those odors and to make sure that dust is suppressed. So it's a good question, and it's a good concern. And Alameda County Environmental Health is it's probably it is one of our biggest commitments to the community, and there will be some dust that gets generated during construction. And so what we are going to make sure is that and try the best, and to make sure that we are regulating and making sure there are good controls in place that any dust that is related to this site is not impacted with contaminated soil. So I'd like to say that we didn't have to do it, but every construction site has some form of contamination. And so it's really good when you have an agency like Environmental Health overseeing it, because we are asking for a lot of protocols to make sure that the community is safe during that.
And then Dylan, can you also just explain that you actually do this at quite a few sites? So this site isn't unique, I think.
Yep. So and that's true too, and it doesn't lessen your concerns. I get your concerns, and I'm concerned about it too. But it is, as Tracy said, there are a lot of sites where we are working with different people to clean them up so that they can be returned to some kind of use instead of just a vacant lot. And so these are normal kinds of practices. This is not unique. This is not something that isn't dealt with. And I'm not gonna say that there's no potential that you will smell something, but because it is a gas station. And so, we're going to do everything we can to minimize those impacts, and that they would be very short term.
Nicole, did that answer your question?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
And I'm also going to put my number in the chat function, and you can call me anytime before, after, during the work, and I'll work with you if you have any concerns.
And I think this is Surjit here from Reveal Properties. Nicole, thank you for your question. And again, I think what we are trying to do here is to employ the best consultants and best architects and developers, obviously working with the environmental agency of the city, Dylan and Jonathan, to comply with their requirements. I will tell you that, you know, the lifelong facilities today which are available in the city are fragmented. I did text Kanwar Singh, who is the CFO and is also on the call right now. Actually, I asked him to join, and he, you know, Kanwar, if you can hear us, you know, maybe you can speak, but we will.
Yeah, so I'm on.
We want to assure you that the facility that we are building is state of the art. It is going to consolidate all the facilities, and in the end, it is going to be extremely beneficial to the community. Kanwar Singh is right now on the call. He's the Chief Financial Officer of Lifelong. And Kanwar, we have Nicole, who is one of the residents here, who joined this public meeting and had a great question about concerns about, you know, the toxins and the community, etc., which Dylan has answered. But maybe you want to talk through as to why Lifelong is keen to consolidate all the facilities and bring this state-of-the-art facility into the community.
Sure. Thank you very much, Surjit. Hi, and I'm sorry, who was the person who was asking question? What was the name?
Nicole is the name.
Nicole. Hi, Nicole. Nicole, I'm the Chief Financial Officer for Lifelong, and we have been in the community serving the underserved and all the folks who have been, you know, in the homeless and doing street medicine and that kind of stuff in the Oakland area. We have been in the Foothill Mall. I don't know if you know, there's it used to be over 60 health centers. It's now the Lifelong Medical Care. And we also are at the Howard Daniel site, and we are trying to consolidate those two locations into this place because we have sort of expanded and we want to bring in dental and other good services into that area, which will be beneficial to both the underserved people on Medi-Cal, Medicare, and to the community at large. It is one of the state-of-the-art project, as Sujit said. And we want to assure you that one of the things, this site was a previously contaminated site. I don't know if it was mentioned already. And we are committed to kind of keeping, you know, every kind of, I mean, I'm getting assured by the builders that all kind of mitigations will be taken. And it is not an excavation where we're going, digging in and building down. It's kind of going from the place where we are at the level going up, and the lower level is also going to be parking, so that kind of prevents anything like toxins or anything kind of staying contained or impacting the residents in the neighborhood.
So I'm just, Kanwar, I just want to make sure I have this correct. You have a facility at Eastmont, you have another, I think at 99, and you're going to close those and consolidate at this property to a state-of-the-art.
Yeah, not the Eastmont, not the Eastmont
not
one.
the
We are
Eastmont.
going to, no. We are going to close the, and we are still deciding whether we want to do behavioral health in the, I don't know if you know, down on, I think it's MacArthur. There is a Howard Daniel site, and we are going to consolidate that, and we are going to bring in. So right now, we don't have like the we're going to consolidate the pediatric practice, the primary care practice, and what we are missing in that area hugely is the dental, and we want to bring in dental for the community, which has been expressed time and time again. And because we have expanded, I mean, we have totally, there's no place to build dental. This will be the state of the art dental, which will be built with new, you know, technology and equipment and stuff like that.
Got it. Nicole, did that answer your question?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
You got it.
Thank you. And Nicole, you feel free to email me. I can be reached at ksing@lifelongmedical.org. Once again, K, like in kite, SINGH, at lifelongmedical.org. And I'll be more than happy to answer all your questions or any questions that you might even have later on.
And I'm going to put that in the chat box for you.
I'll just put it in.
Oh, okay. Perfect. Okay. Other questions, comments, concerns?
Yes, I had one more question. So I know you talked about there being like this vapor mitigation system, and I know there's going to be this plastic barrier underneath the clinic to prevent the vapors from going into the clinic. But Like, is that going to be the case where you stop the vapors from going into the clinic, but then these vapors can potentially go underneath our houses?
Jonathan, can you
I
address?
can, yeah, I can address that. Really, the barrier and ventilation system has two components, and the way that it works, it's not that you're pushing those vapors elsewhere. It's actually the opposite of that. We are giving a path for these vapors to go up above the building, so that when they are vented, they're not vented at a level where they can enter other people's houses, or that they're in the breathable zone. They're being vented up above all that stuff. And this is a refresh my memory here. I believe this is a 3-story building, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. So it'll be 3 stories up where these stacks are, and that's where anything that's emitted is going to be going out. It's also kind of important to note that as the site sits right now, the vapors that are getting to the ground are just going out into the atmosphere. And that doing this development will accomplish 2 goals. One, you'll remove a bunch of mass, specifically the TPH that you had mentioned in the dispensing area. That's one of the areas that the county had a lot of concern over as well. It's one of the first things that when we were looking at this and going over a corrective action plan and saying what is appropriate, one of the big things that we said is you've got to remove some of that mass. And so one, by doing the excavation, you're going to reduce how much is there to be able to get to the surface in the first place. And the second thing you're doing is, rather than those vapors coming out of the grass right now, right, just the surface, you collect them through this piping system and you emit them out the top. So what changes isn't that you've completely, you're never going to get 100% of the contamination out, right? There's always going to be little stringers here and there that are going to remain. That's just the nature of contamination. But we are requiring that they do the best thing that they can that will protect the not only on-site occupants, but the off-site occupants. The other really important thing about a ventilation system like this is that just like water flows from uphill to downhill, vapor flows from high pressure to a low pressure. And when you create a venting system like this, you create a low pressure zone underneath this building. And so it'll actually draw vapors towards where those emission points are, which prevents it from going underneath other people's buildings to the extent possible. And so that is kind of the way that gets addressed. Does that all make sense? Do you have follow-up questions to that, or did that address?
I want to chime in there. And remind me of your name again.
Nicole.
Hi, Nicole. This is Dylan. So I think you're a very smart young woman, and I appreciate your comments, and I appreciate that you actually went on to GeoTracker and looked at documents, and your questions are good. And I want to tell you, because it is my commitment to tell the truth. I'm going to tell you that there are some other releases in this neighborhood that are not associated with this site. And they that neighborhood does have some other chemical releases. And the reason I'm saying that is because it is important to tell the truth, and it is important to know that what's going on at this site is making things better on this slice of the world and in this slice of the neighborhood from contamination at this site, including the vapor mitigation system that will protect occupants of the building, but is not designed to push it towards other people. But I want, because I think that you're the kind of person that needs to be vocal and an advocate for your neighborhood. And so I'm not going to say that there isn't other contamination at the site that may be underneath people's houses. It is true, there are. And so these are conversations that need to continue to be had at a level. Contact your supervisor, Nate Miley, contact your council person, and pose the kind of questions you're posing, because there is no, if there aren't people like Sergey cleaning up this site, the other sites where there have been releases, there aren't people cleaning them up. So the reason I'm saying that is this project itself will clean up some of the contamination in this neighborhood, but it won't clean up all the contamination in the neighborhood. And this particular project will make it better. But I would, if you'd like to talk to me some more, I would love to talk to you some more. And Tracy, you could give her my phone number, my contact information. That'd be great.
And what I would like to say, Nicole and Dylan, thank you for saying that, and hopefully it has come across to you from an environmental standpoint or agency standpoint. We don't want to do, Lifelong doesn't want to do, and we don't want to do anything which is in any way, and I stress any way in capital, negative or harmful for the community. Why? Because we are building a community support center in terms of medical services, services that Lifelong does. We have been governed, and we will continue to be governed by Dylan and her team on one end, and the best environmental consultants that probably money can buy in London. Hopefully, we all can agree to that. And we would spend whatever it takes to make sure that residents are safe, kids are safe. It is our commitment to. I mean, we are in the business of not real estate. We're in the business of building community centers which can help take care of health. So, if Dylan, you and Jonathan, based on public comments, were to say that, look, you guys can't do it, we will scrap this project tomorrow morning. We have no problem with that. It is our commitment to make sure that whatever is the best systems that science can buy and money can buy to mitigate any health risk whatsoever for the community, we will put that in. It doesn't matter what it costs.
So Surjit, I'd like to mention something from the Lifelong standpoint. So Lifelong in the past years has done almost 5 or 6 projects, out of which almost 4 projects were where there were existing gas stations and contaminated sites. I can talk about 3260 Alcatraz Avenue, which was a very badly contaminated site. We currently have a clinic, a seniors adult day healthcare with a housing development houses on the top. Then we did the most sophisticated building in Jenkins. It's called the William Jenkins Health Center in Richmond. It was also similarly contaminated, and we went through the exact similar process and made sure that we take care of any contaminants. And by the way, for your records, you need to also know that Lifelong has a OSHPD standard. We are governed by OSHPD standards, and we have to make sure that the building is built by those health and safety standards. Thank you.
So what I was basically saying was, Dylan, to reiterate your point, and Nicole, hopefully, I don't know if it helps erase concerns, but I think I want to reiterate a commitment that we will be governed by the highest level of environmental standards that Dylan and Jonathan put on us to not only make sure that the site is safe, but also we put all remediation systems, mitigation systems, what have you, to put safety of residents and kids first. Whatever it takes, we will do it. Now, if those systems don't eliminate concerns, and if Dylan and Jonathan say no, and residents say no, we'll scrap the project. We have no problem with that. We believe the project is good for the community. We believe we have engaged the best in the world to make sure that it stays safe for the community. But in the end, if environmental agency and residents believe that it is not, we are not wedded to this. It is fine.
I think one additional thing to add in and to make sure that it's clear is that the Alameda County Department of Environmental Health's oversight of this does not end once the building is built. There are long-term stewardship requirements, and they will be monitoring this system for as long as it's operating. So year after year, they're going to be doing monitoring to evaluate what are the conditions underneath this building. What are we venting in the atmosphere, and is it continuing to work, so that we make sure that it's not just a, hey, it worked at time 0. We want to make sure that it works for the life cycle of the building. So as long as there's something there that needs to be vented and needs to not accumulate, needs to not get pushed out. There's going to be regulatory oversight, and there will be sampling, and there will be follow through. So I want to make sure that that part is clear as well. With that being said, Nicole, do you have any other questions? You asked some great ones, and I love that you're involved and you've looked at this. It's phenomenal when we get involvement like this.
Actually, Jonathan, can I jump in really quick?
Yeah.
Not to overwhelm Nicole with all of these responses, but just to add on to that, you know, Nicole, you probably took a look at the CAP, the corrective action plan that's available on GeoTracker. But in addition to everything that's included there, and actually it's on one of the slides here, we are doing some additional sampling as part of our proposed corrective action plan to further evaluate potential impacts near that former building to make sure that we're minimizing any potential offsite impacts. So that is, obviously we're looking at this corrective action plan in terms of the proposed development, but also very much keeping in mind any potential impacts to the neighboring sites as well. So there is an element of this corrective action plan that includes some additional sampling to address that, because we are looking at that, and that's a great question.
Okay. Nicole, other thoughts or questions from you?
No, I was just trying to make sure that I didn't speak over anybody while they were talking. I feel a little bit more comfortable in terms of, you know, the environmental toxins and things like that. It more so just because it seems like things are going to be monitored, and at least like it's being monitored by Alameda County and 2 different agencies basically. And the cars won't be entering from 106, because that was one of my main concerns about there potentially being toxins coming from the site, and then you have toxins coming from the trucks. But since they're going to be entering, exiting on Foothill, I feel a little bit better about everything.
Oh, you were worried about emissions from the cars, I see. Is that it?
Yeah, emissions from the cars along with whatever would be potentially coming from the site. Yeah.
Okay. I put my name in the chat box, and if you'd like to follow up with anybody here, you can either shoot me your email or call me, and I can put you in touch with anybody. And I think we're happy to add you to the email list as we move forward. It's always kind of nice to have information and be armed with that. So if you send your email or tell me what the preferred way to communicate is with you, I'm happy to do that.
I can send you my email.
Okay, just throw it in the chat function.
And again, Nicole, if there is any other, Surjit here, but if there's any other concern, I mean, I want to make sure that collectively between myself, Kanwar, Dylan, Jonathan, we have addressed your valid questions. Again, thank you for bringing them up, because I think they're important. We want to make sure that before we end this call, you feel like you have a genuine satisfaction rather than a sort of, a broad brush here. We are very committed to community concern, and we want to make sure that this process is actually held to the highest standards of hearing you and also incorporating as to what we can do to make sure that we have your support.
Yeah, no, thank you for doing that. I think you all helped basically explaining like how the site is going to be built and how like the different techniques you're doing to help get the toxins out. Once I got a better understanding, that really helped. So it's not like I'm just saying everything's fine and I'm not feeling more comfortable. I am.
Yeah, and one more thing, Nicole, I want to let you know one more very good point is that before we had embarked on this project, we had approached the neighbors, and there was going to be, the site is zoned for a gas station and a mini mart or whatever. And we actually approached the neighbors, and the immediate neighbor next to our facility had said very clearly, I'm so glad that you guys are coming here versus a gas station or something which is going to increase further the pollution and the noise in that and other activities in that neighborhood. So having said that, I think if that area, that region will probably have one of the finest structures and one of the structures which is housed for the community and, which serves the community. And so I just want to reiterate that this is probably the best option that that site has. And also because of the proximity to the bus station, the bus terminal, this is at Lifelong, we felt that this is the best site to build any kind of a facility. And yeah, so I think it'll go a long way for that area.
All right. Thank you. Any Nicole, any last comments? And you put your number, put your email in the chat. And so I think we're good. I got it. Any last thoughts from you?
No, I just wanted to say thank you to everyone for, explaining and listening and explaining.
Well, we want to thank you for attending. And Dylan, did you want to say anything else since this is Alameda's meeting? Dylan, Jonathan?
I just want to thank you for joining in, Nicole. Again, if you have anything that you want to talk about, please call me, and Tracy can give you.
I have her information. We're good.
Yeah, that'd be great. And look forward to talking to you if you call me.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a nice night.